Well, I would like to thank our presenters for their excellent presentations and the audience for being present during this symposium. We will have room for some questions. It might not be clear to everyone, but you can type your questions in the Sparkle platform by clicking on the three dots on the upper right, in the upper right corner of your screen. And you can type your questions in there. Well, while we're waiting for questions to come in, I would like to start by asking a question to Dr. Donna Lang. So, Donna, based on your current experiences and results, what will be the most promising directions for future research? And what does it take basically to take these findings, or how do you see these findings to be used in a clinical setting?
Good morning, Maarten. Excuse me. Good morning, Maarten. So the first question really was about where we hope to take our scanning next. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, there are a number of things that we weren't able to do in the first pass of examining our participants. And one of the things that I mentioned at the end of my talk was that we wanted to add on myelin water imaging, which I think for us is really important in trying to understand the white matter pathways that are subserving some of the cognitive problems that are going on in our population. And the cognitive problems really are substantial and impact the daily functioning, the ability for our participants to be able to engage in normal activities. So that's something that we want to understand much more in depth. I think the other thing that really came out is that from the FLAIR imaging and what we were able to get from the MRA, we could see that a lot of these people have some underlying microvascular pathology as well as really more macrovascular pathology. So that's something that we have to pay much more attention to in terms of addressing some of their health problems and how to manage their health problems as they're aging. So these things tend to worsen over time, which probably really contributes to their decreased lifespan. So those are the two directions that we're hoping to go.
Very clear, thank you. And
you're welcome.
And to the is that also answering the latter part, how what the clinical impact of these findings could be basically in sort of for the subjects individually?
The thing that I think was really surprising to me is how many of our participants who had a significant head injury, but we're no longer aware of that, which of course means that they weren't seeking out support or health care for problems associated with that. And we're hoping that this can improve once we are able to show more clearly that this is something that perhaps should be part of the general oversight of taking care of this particular population, that they all should start with perhaps a baseline scan of some kind, and that if we start to see that they cannot correctly report what's happening to them, that this should be done almost routinely.
That's an interesting finding indeed. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. You're and Dr. Lindy Ray, yeah, you show very nicely that there's a reduction in the fiber density in patients with WSS and related to a high reflex sum score. Would it be possible to study basically what is the underlying cause of these inhibition of reflexes based on what you've found so far? Could you comment on that?
I expect the underlying cause is related to the genetic deletion, and there are up to 28 genes deleted in Williams syndrome. Some of them are transcription factors in the brain. There's one that's associated with the development of language, but most of the language genes have only started to be associated with language in the last evolutionarily recent period. So the question is, to some extent, what did those genes do before they were language genes? Because language is something that's been sort of plastered onto our brains quite recently. And the genes have been adapted to work for that. So it may be that some of those genes are associated with the gait abnormalities. On the other hand, doing the imaging could be a way of tracking remediation of the gait problems as well. You know, you could try and remediate the gait problems through exercises or methods like that and see what difference that made to the fiber tracks, which would give you a sort of another way of looking at the causality and not just the correlation.
Yeah, thanks. So related to that, actually, you also show volume changes, of course, related to the lingual domain. In many diseases, volume changes are sort of the end point of a disease. So there's probably already a lot going on before that. Is there a role for MRI there to follow already before these volume changes occur? I don't know how this occurs during development of these patients. Would it have a benefit for these patients to be able to follow that in an earlier stage before these volume changes take place?
I don't know, because it's not really known. They haven't really looked at Williams' development, and really the volume changes are at this level are something that's reasonably novel. There are other studies out there looking at volume changes in Williams, but it depends how you slice and dice the brain, really, what you come up with. I think the Williams brain may come out the way it does very early on. And, you know, the changes in the volume may tell us something about the development of language, for example. I'm not sure what they'll tell us about Williams. It's really difficult to say because, you know, we know that a volume change is a volume change, and you don't necessarily know that. Everyone assumes that smaller is worse and bigger is better, but we know from imaging studies that that's not always the case as well. You can't necessarily assume that. So without doing very detailed studies, I think, of the genes and the knockouts and that sort of thing, I think it would be very difficult to draw any conclusions from those volume changes.
Okay, that's clear. Well, thank you very much. I'm looking at the chat and I see there are no more questions coming in. So I would like to thank both our presenters and the audience again. And I would like to invite you, if you wish to learn more about Philips, please visit our booth or drop me or my colleagues present there a message. And with that, we will conclude this session, and I would like to wish you a wonderful rest of the week at OHBM. Thank you and bye.